My name is Alex, and I'm 24 years old. At an age where most people are just starting to figure things out, I had already faced the harsh reality that my family didn't believe in me. I've always worked hard to prove my worth, but no matter what I did, it never seemed to be enough. It wasn't until a moment I'll never forget, standing in front of my family at a gathering meant to celebrate our legacy, that I was told, "You're too selfish to inherit anything." That moment cut deep, and it was the turning point in my life. It ignited something within me, something I never knew I had. Little did they know it was the moment I began my journey of not just proving them wrong, but surpassing every expectation they ever had for me growing up. I was always in the shadow of my siblings. They were the golden children, the ones who received all the praise, attention, and encouragement. I, on the other hand, was often overlooked. My achievements didn't seem to matter, and my ambitions were dismissed. Whether it was my career aspirations, my personal dreams, or the simple things I worked hard for, I was made to feel like I wasn't enough. The most painful part was that it came from the people I wanted to make proud the most, my own family. They didn't think I was capable of carrying the family legacy. They didn't believe in me. But instead of accepting that, I decided to fight back in a way they never saw coming. Standing there, listening to their harsh words, I promised myself something. I would build my future, my success, and my legacy without needing their approval. I didn't need their inheritance to succeed. I would prove that I could achieve everything they thought was impossible. And so my journey began. How did I go from being dismissed to taking the very thing they told me I'd never have? The answer will surprise you. I was born into a family that on the outside seemed perfect. My parents, Robert and Deanna, were well established in their careers, dad an accountant and mom a high school teacher. We lived in a suburban home, complete with the classic white picket fence and family pictures that told a story of happiness and prosperity. But what those pictures didn't show were the silent expectations, the unspoken biases, and the constant feeling that I was somehow not quite enough. I was the other child, the one who had to constantly prove my worth despite my achievements. My siblings, Lily and Jake, were the stars of the family. Lily was 2 years younger than me, but always seemed to shine brighter. She had the charm, the confidence, and the grades that made everyone stop and take notice. Jake, being the eldest, was the one who could do no wrong. He was Dad's right-hand man when it came to the family business, and the one who always seemed to have a way of making things work with ease. Meanwhile, I was constantly trying to catch up, trying to earn the same approval that seemed to come so naturally to them. I remember one of the earliest signs of favoritism: Christmas morning. While Lily opened expensive gifts like the latest toys and tech gadgets, I was handed a set of plain socks or some practical gift that I didn't even know I needed. At first, I told myself it was no big deal, but as I got older, it became more than just Christmas mornings. My accomplishments seemed to fall on deaf ears. In high school, I won a regional business competition and was chosen to represent our school in a national debate. But when I came home, the applause went to Lily for her perfect grades in school. "Your sister needs more encouragement, Alex," my mom would say, a subtle reminder that her achievements were more important. At family gatherings, I'd sit in the back, listening as my parents talked about how talented Lily was, how she'd excelled in everything she put her mind to. I sat there feeling invisible. It was always Lily this and Jake that, but I had to fight for every bit of recognition I received. My work ethic, my achievements, and my dedication seemed like secondary concerns. It took years for me to realize the emotional toll this favoritism had on me. As I grew older, I began to resent the idea that my value was always tied to how much I could give to the family, how much I could prove to them. I remember a conversation with my dad when I was in my junior year of high school. "You're not like your sister, Alex," he told me one day. "You need to work harder. She's just naturally gifted." That statement stung like nothing else. It wasn't the first time he had compared me to her, but this time it shattered something inside me. The constant comparisons, the feeling that I wasn't quite good enough, left me emotionally drained. I wanted to be proud of my accomplishments, but how could I when the people I looked up to were never proud of me in the way they were proud of my siblings? I started to doubt myself, to wonder if I would ever be seen for who I truly was. But something shifted within me after that conversation. I made a decision. No matter how many times they told me I wasn't good enough, I would find a way to prove them wrong. I wasn't going to let them define me. I would define myself. It wasn't about earning their approval anymore. It was about showing myself and the world that I was capable of greatness. After that turning point, I knew I had to take matters into my own hands. I wasn't going to wait around for my parents or anyone else to validate me. I took a long, hard look at where I was and where I wanted to be, and then I made a plan. I decided to pour my energy into things that mattered to me, to things I knew I could control, my education and my future. While my siblings were focused on their studies and extracurriculars, I worked long hours after school at a local coffee shop to pay for the things I needed. I knew I couldn't rely on my parents for financial support, especially since they always seemed to favor Lily and Jake. I wanted to pay for my college application fees, textbooks, and anything else that would keep me on track. At the same time, I pushed myself to maintain a 4 GPA. It wasn't easy, juggling a job and school, but I was determined to prove that I was capable of achieving something bigger than just getting by. I also decided to take on leadership roles in the clubs and activities I joined. I was part of the debate team, the business club, and even started an initiative to help local businesses improve their marketing. It wasn't just about filling my resume anymore. It was about building my own sense of self-worth. I began to see my hard work paying off when I received praise from my teachers and mentors for the effort I was putting into everything I did. Still, despite my success, I couldn't help but wonder if my family would ever recognize it. During this time, I found myself increasingly isolated from my family. Their lack of support made it even harder to share my victories with them. But I wasn't truly alone. One of the biggest turning points came when I found mentors who genuinely believed in me, people who saw my potential even when my family refused to. One of those mentors was Mr. Rivera, my economics teacher. He was the first one to recognize my drive and work ethic, even though my parents never acknowledged it. He took me under his wing, helping me with college applications and guiding me through the process of developing my business ideas. His belief in me gave me the confidence I needed to push forward. He wasn't just a teacher, he became a role model who taught me the importance of resilience and determination. Outside of school, I found support in unexpected places. A group of friends from the coffee shop where I worked became my emotional support system. They had seen the struggles I went through and cheered me on, reminding me that I was more than capable of succeeding. These people helped me understand that it wasn't about waiting for validation from my family. It was about validating myself and trusting my own journey. As the years went on, the sacrifices I made started to show results. I became more focused, more determined, and more confident in my abilities. But it wasn't easy. I spent nights working on projects, studying for exams, and refining my business plan. There were moments when I felt like giving up, especially when I saw my siblings living more carefree lives with financial support and constant encouragement from my parents. But I pushed through. I remember one night in particular, after a long shift at the coffee shop, sat at my desk, exhausted but determined. I had just completed a business proposal for a competition that could change my life. I was doing it all on my own, no handouts, no support from family, but I knew that this was my shot. When I submitted the proposal, I didn't expect it to be perfect, but I knew I had done my best. A few weeks later, when I received the news that I had won the competition, it felt like everything I had sacrificed, all the sleepless nights and the hard work had finally paid off. It wasn't just about the prize money. It was about proving to myself that I could succeed without relying on anyone else. I had achieved something big, and it was my first true victory in the face of adversity. The first significant breakthrough came when I landed my first job in the field I had worked so hard to get into, business consulting. After years of preparing, taking on every opportunity to learn, and pouring my energy into perfecting my skills, I was finally given the chance. The position wasn't glamorous by any means. It was an entry-level job with long hours, low pay, and high expectations. But to me, it was everything. It was the first official step into the world I had dreamed of, the world my family had dismissed as unrealistic for me. I vividly remember the first day I walked into the office. As I sat in the conference room during the orientation, I couldn't help but feel a rush of pride. This was the moment where I would start proving to the world and to myself that I was capable of more than they had ever given me credit for. I wasn't just an afterthought anymore. I was someone who had earned their place at the table. In the months that followed, I began to prove myself in ways I never expected. My work ethic, my innovative ideas, and my willingness to put in the extra hours didn't go unnoticed. Within 6 months, I was given the responsibility of leading a major project for one of our biggest clients. It was a risky move, one that could either make or break my career, but I wasn't about to back down. I poured all my energy into the project, working late into the night, carefully considering every detail and making sure every part of the plan was executed flawlessly. When the project was completed, it exceeded all expectations. Not only did we secure a long-term contract with the client, but my boss praised my leadership and problem-solving skills, publicly acknowledging my contributions in front of the team. For the first time in my life, I felt truly recognized for my abilities. But what made the success even sweeter was knowing that I had achieved it on my own. No one else's approval had been necessary for me to succeed. I had done it all by myself. When I shared the news with my family, the reaction was underwhelming. I had expected some form of recognition, but instead I was met with indifference. They didn't see the magnitude of my achievement. It wasn't enough for them. They didn't acknowledge the sacrifices I had made or the struggles I had faced. My parents simply said, "That's nice, Alex, but you still have a long way to go." I didn't let it bother me, not at first. I was used to their dismissive attitude, but the truth was, it stung. Here I was, achieving the very success they had once told me I would never reach, and they couldn't even bring themselves to recognize it. Their failure to acknowledge my efforts was a reminder of why I had made this journey in the first place. It wasn't for them. It was for me. Despite the lack of acknowledgement, I knew I had reached a pivotal moment. I had built something real, something tangible. I had accomplished something significant, and that was enough. I realized that my worth wasn't dependent on their validation anymore. I had proven to myself that I was capable of achieving greatness, even if they never saw it. And that was more than enough to fuel the next steps of my journey. As my career progressed, so did the tension between my family and me. Despite my success, despite everything I had achieved on my own, my family's response remained cold and detached. It was as if they couldn't bring themselves to see me as more than the person they had once dismissed. While I continued to build my career, my personal life, and my future, I found it harder and harder to share my victories with them. Their indifference felt like a constant weight on my shoulders, and it became clear that no matter how successful I became, they would never fully recognize or celebrate my achievements. I had long since stopped seeking their approval, but deep down, I still yearned for a moment when they would finally acknowledge the person I had become. I remember a particular family gathering just after I had secured a promotion at work. It was a small celebration, but my parents barely said anything. "That's good, Alex," my mom said, without much enthusiasm. "But, your sister's been doing well too." My heart sank. It wasn't just about the lack of praise. It was the constant comparison. No matter what I did, it seemed like I could never measure up to the standard they had set for my siblings. One evening, after another lackluster conversation about my recent success, I reached my breaking point. I couldn't keep pretending like their indifference didn't bother me. So I confronted them. Sitting at the dinner table, I looked at my parents and said, "Why is it that no matter what I do, you always overlook me? I've worked so hard to get to where I am, and it feels like you can't even recognize it." The silence in the room was deafening. My parents exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond. My dad finally broke the silence. "Alex, it's not that we don't appreciate what you've done, but, your sister and brother, they've always had more potential. We didn't want to waste time focusing on you because we thought you didn't need the same kind of attention." At that moment, those words hit me harder than anything they had ever said before. It was their version of an apology, but it was still rooted in favoritism. They had never truly believed in me, never recognized my struggles or my efforts, and that realization stung more than anything. I looked at them and said, "I've learned that I don't need your approval to succeed. I've been doing it all on my own, and I've done more than you could ever imagine." I stood up from the table and walked away, not out of anger, but out of a sense of finality. It was the moment I realized that no matter how far I went, I couldn't rely on them for validation. My success would have to be enough for me, even if they never truly recognized it. In that moment of confrontation, something shifted inside me. I realized that the weight I had carried for so long, the need for their approval, was no longer necessary. I had spent so much time trying to live up to their expectations, but in the process, I had lost sight of my own worth. My journey had been about proving myself to them, but now I understood that it wasn't about them at all. It was about me. It was about acknowledging my own achievements, no matter how small or large, and celebrating them on my own terms. The more I reflected on my journey, the more I realized that my success wasn't just about reaching milestones. It was about the resilience I had developed along the way. It was about overcoming the doubts, the rejection, and the negativity that had once weighed me down. And in that moment, I felt a sense of freedom. I had proven to myself that I was more than enough, and that was the only validation I would ever need. After years of hard work, late nights, and sacrifice, the day finally came when everything I had worked for was recognized, not just by myself, but by the world. My company had grown to a point where it was attracting attention from industry leaders. And then came the invitation I had long dreamed of. I was asked to speak at a prestigious business conference. It was the kind of recognition that could put me on the map for good. And for the first time, I felt a sense of validation that came from the outside world, not just from my own journey. As I walked up to the stage, the audience full of professionals and influencers, I couldn't help but think back to where it all began. The times I had been overlooked, dismissed, and told I wasn't capable. But there I was, standing tall, ready to share my story of resilience, perseverance, and success. This was my moment. Not just to share my business journey, but to show the world who I had become. The real shock, however, came later that evening. My parents had reluctantly agreed to attend the event, though I could tell from their coldness that they still didn't fully understand the significance of what was happening. They weren't there for me during the struggles, and they certainly hadn't believed in me when I started. But they were there now, sitting quietly in the back of the conference hall, watching as I was introduced as the keynote speaker. When my speech ended, the applause was overwhelming. People lined up to congratulate me, asking for advice and even offering collaboration opportunities. I felt the weight of my family's indifference lift, knowing that I had finally earned the recognition I had worked so hard to receive. But when I glanced back at my parents, I saw their faces. They were stunned, clearly not expecting the magnitude of my success. They were surrounded by a sea of strangers who admired me while they had only ever doubted me. It was in that moment that I realized the approval I had been seeking for so long wasn't as important as I once thought. The validation from strangers, from people who didn't know my struggles but still saw my worth, was more powerful than the approval I had hoped to get from my family. And yet, despite the recognition from everyone else, my parents remained silent, unsure of how to process the reality of the person I had become. As the event wrapped up, I received a call from my grandmother, Eleanor. She had been my constant source of support and encouragement, and hearing her voice was like a wave of comfort. "I knew you had it in you, Alex," she said, pride evident in her tone. "You've always been more than they gave you credit for." That conversation was exactly what I needed in that moment. It wasn't just about the career success or the accolades. It was about the journey that had shaped me into who I was. I had fought for my place in the world against every obstacle, every rejection, and every dismissive word from the people who were supposed to believe in me the most. Now, I was in a position of power, not because I sought revenge, but because I had finally embraced my own potential. Later that evening, as I looked back at the crowd, I realized something important. This was my moment of vindication, not because my family would suddenly recognize my worth, but because I no longer needed their approval to feel successful. I had built my empire not on the foundation of family expectation, but on the foundation of my own perseverance and belief in myself. That evening, as the lights dimmed and the conference came to a close, I understood that the true reward was never going to be about making them see my success. It was about seeing my own value and knowing that I had achieved everything on my own terms. Looking back, I can hardly recognize the person I was when I started this journey. I was someone who constantly sought validation, approval, and recognition from those I admired most, my family. But in the process of proving them wrong, I ended up discovering something much more important: my own self-worth. It took years of hard work, sacrifice, and facing my deepest fears of rejection to realize that the opinions of others don't define who I am or what I can achieve. Throughout my journey, I learned how to harness the power of my determination and channel it into something meaningful. There were times when I felt like giving up, when the weight of the emotional strain seemed too much to bear. But each time I picked myself up, I grew stronger. Each failure, each rejection became a lesson. And with every victory, small or large, I became more confident in my abilities and more determined to chart my own path forward. While the journey was difficult, it was also transformative. The years I spent chasing approval taught me invaluable lessons about who I am. I learned that the real strength lies in accepting yourself, even when the people around you don't. The family dynamics that once caused me pain became the driving force that pushed me towards success. I understood that while I may have been overlooked and misunderstood by the people I loved, their failure to see my potential only made me more resilient. I've realized that the struggles of my past were not obstacles. They were opportunities to grow, to prove to myself that I could overcome anything. They taught me that my value is not determined by external recognition, but by my own belief in my potential. The wounds of the past became the foundation for my future success, and the pain became fuel for my ambition. As I've moved forward in my career and life, my relationships have changed. I've learned to surround myself with people who truly believe in me, not because of my family connections, but because of who I am and what I stand for. These new allies, mentors, and friends have shown me the value of building a support system based on mutual respect and genuine care. They remind me that success isn't just about achieving goals. It's about having the right people by your side who cheer for you, not out of obligation, but because they see your worth. Oh, my relationship with my family is still a work in progress. I've come to accept that it may never be perfect. I've realized that true healing doesn't require the approval of others, but the ability to accept yourself and let go of the need for validation. I've learned to move forward with the understanding that I don't need anyone's approval to feel worthy of my success. My achievements are mine and they are enough. To anyone reading this, I want to share something important. Your worth is not determined by anyone else's opinion of you. There will always be people who doubt you, who don't see your potential, or who fail to recognize your efforts. But you don't need their approval to succeed. Trust in yourself, believe in your abilities, even when no one else does. Keep pushing forward, even when it feels like the world is against you. Your success is yours to create, and it doesn't depend on anyone else's vision of you. Remember, the most powerful thing you can do is to recognize your own worth, even when others fail to see it. The journey may be long, but every step you take brings you closer to a future where your potential is fully realized. Keep going. You are enough.